You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Samia Sayed. Welcome to the show. Coming up, we have an interview with Danny Richmond and Elyse Brazel over their new interfaith platform called Another Story. But first, the headlines. Social media flooded with false footage of Ukraine crisis. 169 grave sites found at former residential school in Alberta. City of Waterloo sends Anti-Islamophobia plan back to the drawing board. Mennonite leaders say to remember Afghan refugees. And now the details. Social media is flooded with false videos about the current Russian invasion of Ukraine. Instead, they are repurposed footage from other armed conflicts. A video claiming to be Russian soldiers shelling Ukraine was originally posted on January 24, 2022, depicting a clash between ISIS and Kurdish forces in the Syrian city of Hasaka. A clip circulated as a young Ukrainian girl confronting a Russian soldier, which has received over 13 million views on social media, is from 2012. The clip captures 11-year-old Palestinian activist Ahed Tamimi confronting an Israeli soldier. Today is day 6 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Chief Sidney Halcrow of the Kapaweno First Nation announced with sorrow the discovery of 169 potential grave sites at a former residential school in northern Alberta. 54 possible graves were discovered near a church, with an additional 115 found in the cemetery. The graves were found using ground-penetrating radar technology. Many children who died in the residential schools were buried in unmarked graves. Keisha Supernaut, director of the Institute of Prairie and Indigenous Archaeology at the University of Alberta, told local media sources. An estimated 150,000 Indigenous children were registered in residential schools, with over 4,000 deaths recorded. Waterloo Council sent a plan to combat Islamophobia back to staff last week as incomplete. The Coalition of Muslim Women, or CMWKW, had submitted recommendations to Council in October and claimed the draft plan lacked funding and new bylaws. The draft plan included the city's commitment to acts of solidarity, funding for anti-hate training, and working with other municipalities to address Islamophobia. In place of a new bylaw, staff recommended recourse to existing bylaws. Executive Director of CMWKW, Fozia Mazhar, says that she is unaware of how pre-existing bylaws protect racialized people. Regional Chair Karen Redmond says new bylaws can be considered. City Council staff have 1 month to rewrite the plan. Mennonite church leaders in Manitoba are urging people to remember Afghan refugees amid the ongoing Ukrainian crisis. They are most concerned about Christian Afghans, who they believe are vulnerable under the Taliban leadership. Executive Director of the Steinbach Evangelical Mennonite Conference, Tim Dyke, told local media sources that if Christians in Canada did not speak out, then no one would. He said that it costs around $25,000 to $30,000 to sponsor a refugee family for a year. Canadian Council of Anabaptist Leaders have teamed up with Mennonite Central Committee of Canada, which has a refugee sponsorship agreement with the federal government. That's it for the news. And now with us is Danny Richmond and Elyse Brazel, the founders of Another Story Foundation. Danny and Elyse are prominent individuals within their community and are most known for their interfaith efforts. Welcome, Danny and Elyse. It's great to have you here with us today.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
My first question is for you, Danny. Can you tell us what Another Story is?
Sure. Another Story project is a project of the Canadian Interfaith Conversation. It's a community-generated, not a computer-generated, a community-generated compendium of the stories of the people, moments, and communities of faith that have helped shape Canada. We know in these times of division and tension that stories matter, representation matters. And so our hope with this platform that will help tell a wider story and a more complex and a more enriching story of Canada that these will inspire and inform conversations from the classroom to the boardroom across the country, from coast to coast to coast.
That's quite a wide reach there. Now, I'd like to ask my next question to Elyse. How did Another Story start?
Well, Danny and I met about 12 years ago on an interfaith fellowship with the Interfaith Youth Corps. And during our training, we heard lots of stories about faith-based social justice heroes from the United States and around the world who worked together across lines of difference to bring justice to the world. And we had a moment where we kind of looked at each other. We're like, do we know any Canadian stories about faith-based contributions to our country as Canadians? Not really. And we've been working in interfaith ever since. And that's been one of our struggles, is when we are working on anti-Islamophobia or anti-Semitism, working against anti-Semitism, one of the things that we have an issue with is we don't have those stories at our hand to us immediately to reach to. So this project was, the idea is that we want to gather those stories across the country of different communities of faith who contributed to the foundation of Canada, and to share them more widely, to challenge that dominant narrative that only highlights European and settlers.
So Elyse, you said that you met Danny 12 years ago and you were wondering about these stories. So this push or this search for Canadian stories, did it start fairly recently, or was this also 12 years ago?
It's been an ambition for the last 12 years. And we kept saying, somebody should do this. Like, somebody needs to do this. And then eventually we're like, oh, wait, we're somebody. And so we gathered after doing all of this, having these connections across the country, working in interfaith for years. That's been our hope, is that we've been gathering people from different places and different communities to be able to share these stories. So it's been a work in progress, but it just happened within the last couple of years. So
yes, people do say that change does start with you. So it's great to see that you've engaged within this project. My next question is for you, Danny. How can people make a submission?
It's a great question. So if they go to www.another-story.org, it's a really easy to enter form. It's very short, shouldn't take more than 15 to 20 minutes. And it gives a bit more context for folks and tips if they want to understand how to submit their story. We're basically looking for 4 types of stories. Stories of contribution, when a faith community has contributed to the wider landscape of Canada. Stories of cooperation, when communities have come across lines of difference to work together for the greater good. Stories of tension, that we don't want to shy away from the more challenging moments in our history. And so we want that to be part of the fabric of the resources that we're building. And also faith heroes, as Elyse said, those individuals that have helped shape the country for the better, and that we hope to illuminate. And so folks can submit those stories until March 14th is our deadline. And it's a really easy tool to use. And our general guideline is, if we were to speak to your faith community, what are the top 10 stories that people should know to better understand your story? The one challenge that we give is maybe number 8, 9, and 10 should be the stories that people might not know, and to try to illuminate those unknown stories as well, even within your faith tradition.
And those themes are very important for centralizing the stories and making it relevant to that platform. Elyse, I want to ask then, have you gotten many entries yet? Because your deadline is fast approaching.
It is, and we've had a lot of story entries, which has been really great. My favorite story that's popped up is actually from my hometown. So I'm originally from Edmonton, and so the story of the first mosque in Canada is from Edmonton, and it was actually built, funded through interreligious cooperation. So the Muslim community connected in with the Christian community and the Jewish community, and together they raised the funds to build that first mosque in the 1930s. And so I think that that's a really amazing story to highlight that kind of changes the way we think about our history.
And how do you plan to select from these stories? You already said you received so many submissions, and I think you're planning on settling on around 200, which is still a fairly large number. So how do you plan on narrowing down the pool?
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that, we recognize that 200 stories is not nearly enough to tell the full history of Canada. And also, we're incredibly blessed to be able to have so many stories to come. And the project is meant to be an evolving one and continue to grow and evolve over time. Our goal with the first kind of round is to get about 10 to 12 stories per tradition in Canada. And so to help do that, we will try to whittle it down to that number. And we've also recruited a few academics who can also help us kind of validate and verify some of the information.
Mm-hmm. And Danny, what's going to happen to those stories once they're selected?
That's a great question. So we will, right now our site is a submission site, and then we're working in the back end that eventually this site will turn into a site that helps share the stories in a compelling way. We're trying to gear this towards two primary audiences. One is school children, so that it's an exciting and easy to use tool. And the other one is just general community members. As Elyse said, we've been working in interfaith engagement for just over 14 years, both of us. And we want this to be an easy to use tool for researchers, for interfaith, everyday community activists who want those stories at their disposal.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Elyse, what is the purpose of having such a platform? What change are you trying to inspire?
I think that we're trying to create an opportunity for communities who have not been heard before, or their stories haven't been part of Canadians, the story that we tell about Canada, to be able to share those stories in a really easy, accessible way, so that people can learn about our history together. And hopefully, this will bring people together across lines of difference, and then we can work on creating a Canada that we want to live in. Another story. We want to be able to tell another story.
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Danny and Elyse, for joining us and sharing us about the Another Story platform. It seems like a great idea to highlight these stories that people have that are not always shared so easily. So best of luck for the upcoming launch.
Thank you. And remember to go to another-story.org and submit your story. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. You are watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. That's it from our Toronto studios tonight. Make sure to like, subscribe to our channel for more Canadian Muslim content. Stay safe, and until next time.